Welcome to Humanely, the podcast providing allied health and integrative medicine practitioners with the most up-to-date, evidence-based and clinically relevant information. Here's your host, Daniel Reuters.
Hello and welcome to Humanly. My name is Daniel Reuters, and today with me I have Professor Marc Cohen. Welcome, Marc.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. Good to be with you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Just a little bit of background for anyone listening who doesn't know who you are, and I'm sure that most people listening would be very familiar with your work. So you're a medical doctor, university professor, an author, a poet, international speaker, and wellness trailblazer. You spent more than 30 years practicing and researching holistic health. You're the founding board member of the Global Wellness Summit, the founder of the Extreme Wellness Institute, and co-founder of the Bathe the World Foundation. You've got degrees in Western physiology and psychological medicine, and PhDs in Chinese medicine and electrical and computer systems engineering. Now, Dr. Marc, you've actually published more than 100 peer-reviewed scientific papers over the years and many books and technical texts on wellness and natural medicine. You're the co-editor of the first academic book on understanding the global spa industry, co-author of the landmark text, Herbs and Natural Supplements, an evidence-based guide, and I'm sure that most people are very familiar with that piece of work. And you've also done some various other books. You've authored and illustrated a children's book, The Beautiful Mare and the Boy Who Gave Thanks, and the forthcoming book, Bing and Bang Begin. You were previously head of Department of Complementary Medicine at RMIT University, where you oversaw the teaching of Chinese medicine, osteopathy, and chiropractic. And you also developed the online Master of Wellness program. So you're very, very well accomplished. I'm sure there's probably a lot more to add there. I hope I haven't missed out anything too important.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good summary. Thanks. And I don't know if everyone knows about me. I think naturopaths know who I am because they've studied from my textbooks. But I think the wider consumers still don't know who I am. So I'm not sure who your audience is, but I wouldn't assume that everyone knows me.
Well, most of the listeners would be naturopaths, nutritionists, allied health practitioners. So yeah, I'm sure there are probably some people who aren't completely familiar with your work, but yeah, still I would say that 90% of our audience would be very, very familiar with what you've done.
Which is great. Great to speak to a warm audience, yeah.
Absolutely. So, Marc, I understand that you're in Victoria and things have been fairly interesting down there at the moment. One of the things that I actually saw that you were involved in was the COVID Doctors Network. Did you want to speak a little bit to that at all?
Yeah, well, I'm happy to talk about whatever you feel is good. But the COVID Doctors Network is a group of doctors in Victoria, including my mentor, one of my original teachers, and my PhD supervisor, John Murtagh, who wrote the book on general practice that I used to teach out of, teaching medical diagnosis. But these are a group of concerned doctors that wrote an open letter to the government just saying really that the lockdown measures are not based on science and they're damaging much, much more than they're hurting, than they're helping. And so yeah, I've helped promote that. Their website did get taken down and their Facebook page got erased, and they've just put that back up. And it's basically a response from doctors to what's going on. And I think Melbourne has the most draconian lockdown measures of any city on earth. And in the last week, I've just, as I do, my whole life, I've never been into opposing what I don't want and, getting into battles against, big government or, vaccines or fluoride or pesticides. I'd rather work towards what I do want. And very spontaneously in the last week, I've got together with some other really concerned Melburnians who are, super professionals, but they're all festival lovers. And we've created an online protestival, which is a sort of a legal online protest where we broadcast for 12 hours a day from 11:11 a.m. to 11:11 p.m. And we're just building out a website now that will have a whole lot of resources, including, and it's not just the COVID doctors letter to Dan Andrews, the ACNEM and AIMA, which if your audience is natural health practitioners, they should know about, the Australian College of Nutritional and Environmental Medicine, and the Australasian Integrative Medicine Association, of which I was president for more than 8 years in the early 2000s, have also just penned a letter to the government saying, natural medicines are actually being not just ignored, but actively suppressed. And I've also been advocating personally for hydrothermal therapies, which is just hot baths, showers, saunas, steam rooms, etc., as a effective treatment for respiratory viral infections, including COVID-19. And that's also actively being suppressed. And at the start of the pandemic, I was writing articles saying that this is a really safe, tried, true, effective way to boost your immune system by raising your body temperature using a hot bath or a sauna or a shower. And my posts were getting censored, and I was getting trolled, and people were saying, "Oh, you're irresponsible. This is not science-based. No respectable doctor would ever say this." And that got me so riled up that I ended up writing a peer-reviewed paper summarising that evidence, and that's been out for a couple of months now, fully peer-reviewed, and it reviews the evidence for the positive health benefits and the immune-boosting benefits and the antiviral effects of heat. And that evidence comes from 600 million years of evolution, because all fish, birds, insects, reptiles, and mammals raise their body temperature when they have a viral infection. And there's a wealth of historical, epidemiological, laboratory, clinical trial evidence, including randomized controlled trials that show that heat, whether it's from a sauna or a hot spring or a hot bath, can not just prevent, but also treat respiratory viral infections. So I think there needs to be more voices from the medical fraternity, and I think the ACNEM letter and the AIMA letter are open to doctors to sign. That the COVID Doctors Network letter is open for anyone with an AHPRA registration, so that doesn't cover naturopaths, unfortunately, but it does cover dietitians and any AHPRA registered health professional. And it's COVID Doctors Network .com, where they can go and sign that petition. And I think it's really important that we start speaking out from an evidence-based perspective on all the different ways that you can improve your health and well-being and boost your immunity. And that goes, whether it's hydroxychloroquine and zinc, or ivermectin, or using heat, or using nutritional remedies, vitamin C, vitamin D, inhaled hydrogen peroxide. There are so many natural treatments that just really aren't being heard. And of course, if you go against WHO guidelines, you get censored, because that goes against their community guidelines. Any information that goes against a WHO statement. And right now on the WHO website, they say brazenly and falsely that you cannot raise your body temperature no matter how hot or your shower or bath is. And that's just not true. And I've just created a post, in my own bath with a thermometer, just proving that's false. And anyone who has a thermometer in a hot bath can also prove that statement to be false. But because that's a statement that's on the WHO website, if you contradict that, that gives Facebook or all these big tech giants the ability to delete you, because you're going against community guidelines. So I think there is a crisis of truth and medical knowledge, and doctors and health practitioners really need to speak out for the good of their patients and the wider community.
It's really interesting that you say that many doctors are being silenced, especially with those methods that you were mentioning before, because we're sort of given this information that there's only a very limited number of things that can actually help with treating coronavirus. But you're mentioning that heat can actually do that, and by having a warm bath, you can raise your core body temperature enough to overcome the virus. Or are you saying more from a preventative measure?
Heat works on multiple mechanisms. I mean, heat itself can destroy a virus. Now, you can't kill a virus because the virus is not alive in the first place, but specifically coronaviruses have a lipid envelope, and they're very, very fragile. So 55 degrees, it'll just melt like coconut oil going from solid to liquid when it heats up. It just melts and destroys it. And they're actually using heat in America to sterilize police cars, where Ford have installed this heater unit inside the car where the car will heat itself up internally for 55 to 55 degrees, and that'll sterilize it from any coronavirus. Now, in a sauna, you're 70, 80, 90, 100, 120 degrees even. In Europe, they have, saunas that hot. So there's no way that a virus can be survive or, not be destroyed in that temperature. So you can't transmit a virus within a sauna. So that's the direct effect of heat. Yet, despite that, pretty much most of the public saunas in the world right now have been shut down. So there's a direct effect on the virus. There's also a direct effect on our first line of immunity, which is our skin and mucous membranes. And with respiratory viruses, that first line of immunity is the mucous membranes of our nasal sinus, nasal cavity and sinuses. And to ensure the health of, and the strength of that immune defense, you need a warm, moist environment. So that's why respiratory viruses typically come in winter when the air is cool and dry, because that way the mucus can dry out, and you get little cracks in the membrane, and also you're not having as much vitamin D, and the food might not be as fresh. A lot of reasons, but certainly that first line of defense is enhanced by a warm, moist environment. And that can be improved by just increasing the humidity of your house. Ideally, 50% is an ideal, plus or minus 10%. But in a steam room, in a sauna, that raises the temperature of your nasal cavity and sinuses, which in winter is the coldest place in your body, because as well as for being used for breathing, your nasal cavity and the turbinates, where the air goes turbulent flow and mixes, it actually is really important for a heat exchange. So it warms the air and humidifies the air. So again, you can do that externally. Just like heat, you can use a hot bath or a sauna to outsource the energy of fever to the environment. Now, normally if we get sick, we mount a fever, but that takes a lot of metabolic energy, and it's exhausting. And that's a lot of the reason why we're so tired when we're sick, because just raising our body temperature is exhausting. But if we outsource that to a bath or a hot tub or a sauna, you save that energy, but you still get the advantage of increased heat shock proteins and a whole cascade of biochemical, physiological, and psychological events that actually boost your immune system, makes T cells more active so they can migrate, their membranes become more active so antigens can be presented better on antigen-presenting cells. There's a whole lot of activities that heat would activate your first line of defense, which is your mucous membrane. And normally you have two layers of mucus in your sinus cavity. You've got like a thin watery layer on the top, and that captures pollen and particles and pathogens. And then under that, you've the watery layer is actually closest to the cilia, and that allows the cilia to keep sweeping. It's almost like wheat blowing in the wind. So that watery layer above it, that is a sticky layer, and that's what captures the pollen and the particles and the viruses. And if that watery layer dries out and your cilia can't keep beating, and it's like 10, 12 beats per second, and keeps that mucus flowing towards the back of your throat so you can cough it up or swallow it, if that is inhibited, and that can be inhibited by air pollution, can be inhibited by cigarette smoke, and it's inhibited by cold, dry conditions. So that's the first line of defense. That heat and a moist environment will improve. And then the second line of defense is your innate immunity, your T cell responses, macrophage responses, and heat also raising your body temperature will make that more active. And as mammals and highly evolved mammals, we have very sophisticated thermoregulatory mechanisms to balance our body temperature, whereas a virus doesn't have any. A virus just has to sort of survive in the environment, and viruses do well in the cold, but they just don't do well in heat. So there's multiple reasons why heat can boost your immunity, and I think probably the least discussed, but I think probably the most important, are the psychological benefits. Just knowing that there's something you can do at home, which doesn't really cost you much money, doesn't take much equipment or training, that you can do at home to boost your own immunity, and it's actually relaxing. And one of the benefits of a hot bath or a sauna is that it helps you sleep better. And I've done research on saunaing. We published I've got a PhD student right now up in Brisbane Dr. Joy Hussain, who's a medical doctor, but she's doing her PhD on sauna bathing. We've just completed a clinical trial that we're writing up, but we've published some review articles on the clinical benefits of dry sauna bathing. But also, we did a global sauna survey where we surveyed people around the world and say, why do you sauna? What do you do? What benefits do you get? And the overwhelming response was that people do it because they love it and they feel better, but they sleep better. And once you sleep better and you're relaxed, that helps overcome sort of fear and anxiety because you're doing something positive. And if you're sleeping better, that just helps everything because sleep has that impact. And I'm a big fan of permaculture. And Bill Mollison, one of the founders, used to say, when you get the basic things right, everything else can go right by itself. And, sleep is such a basic thing. And so is water and hydration. And I'm a big advocate and really passionate about water. But in terms of, using heat, the evidence is just overwhelming. I mean, there are controlled trials showing that people who have regular saunas prevent having half the incidence of respiratory viral infections, the flu, than people who don't. There are controlled trials showing that you can use heat to actively treat symptomatic effects of respiratory viral infections, and you get symptomatic relief and you get shorter illness. And heat's been used since we had fire and since we hopped into a hot spring, which is ever since humans were humans. So the fact that this treatment is being denied the public, with public bathing facilities and sauna facilities being shut, and even the beaches being shut down, we can't go and improve our health, going to the beach. And there's a whole other aspect of the virome and the microbiome and what I call the bathing biome. Because when we bathe in water, water's never really sterile. So when you bathe in water, and especially when you socially bathe or bathe in the ocean, you're exposing yourself to a whole wealth of genetic material, DNA fragments, just like you do when you go forest bathing, where you exchange biological information with nature. And that's now being researched, and we're realizing that the virome is like this whole microbial internet where viruses become like literally little messages which are packaged in an envelope. And inside the envelope is the message, and these aren't living entities. These are just like communication devices. And sometimes, like a catchy song would catch on in our human communication, a catchy piece of information will catch on in biological information, and it gets reproduced and goes out there. But viruses are not our enemy. Bacteria are not our enemy. They are who we are. There's more bacterial genetic information in our bodies than human information, and there's more viral information in our body than bacterial information. So we live in this whole microbial ecology, and the more we understand and realize that and respect that and enhance the health of our internal and external ecosystem, the better we're going to be and promoting good health. And that's a really basic message, but I don't think it's been told enough. We're made to think that viruses are out there, they're waiting to jump on us and kill us, and we can't touch anything, we have to sterilize everything. And it's really an anti-life movement, whether we use disinfectants and antibiotics and pesticides and sprays to spray down everything and masks to cover ourselves and thinking about other people as the enemy. Well, that's just not the case. And that's really concerning because fear itself is very powerfully immunosuppressive. And if you've studied physiology, there's the autonomic nervous system where you have the fight and flight response, which is what fear generates, and that prepares you for external action, to fight for your life or run from danger, run for your life. And if you're fighting for your life or running for your life, you don't want to waste energy digesting food or healing yourself. That comes later. That comes in rest and digest mode when you're safe in your cave. And right now, there's so many people in this fight and flight mode permanently, and the fear porn and the circus we see in the media really driving down these fearful messages is directly immunosuppressive. And I think it's really important that we counter that. And hanging out in a hot bath, or even better, hanging out in a hot tub with friends, doing it socially or in a sauna, is one of the most powerful things you can do.
Why do you think that more doctors aren't recommending heat therapy? It seems like there's sufficient evidence there, and it's simple, it's safe to do, it's cheap and affordable, all the things that you've already mentioned. Why, in your opinion, aren't more doctors recommending something like this?
I mean, it's a great question. I think a lot of doctors, that we do basic physiology and immunology, but heat therapies are not really taught in medical school. So a lot of doctors aren't aware of it. They're not aware of the research. And also, I think heat therapies have been considered like just a luxury that, you go to a spa or, it's okay, you go to the gym, you do a sauna, but they haven't really understood the benefits. And it's only in the last probably 5 years where we've had a couple of big epidemiological studies out of Finland, which is sort of the sauna capital of the world. In fact, sauna is the only Finnish word in the English language. But there were some big epidemiological studies where they followed a group of men for 20 years and they classified them according to how many saunas they took. And they found out that if you took 3 to 4 saunas a week, you had a less chance of dying of all causes. So it reduced all-cause mortality, but also reduced cardiovascular disease, reduced Alzheimer's disease, reduced pneumonia and respiratory infections, respiratory viruses. So this research, which has been well done, is now starting to go into the medical literature, but we know that it takes about 20 years for something to go from the medical literature into clinical practice. So I think a lot of doctors don't know about it. And, there has been a sort of a move to sort of sideline it or actively suppress that information. As I say, when I've been posting about this, my posts get deleted because I go against community guidelines because the fact checkers and WHO says you can't raise your body temperature with a hot shower or sauna. So if I say...
And you've done the research to say that it can.
Well, it's not my research. I'm just repeating all this. You look up any study on saunaing and they'll say, we took body temperature or rectal temperature often if they're doing good research, and they show that the body temperature goes up to, 38, 39, 39.5 as a temporary measure. And I think it's important to stress that if you artificially raise your body temperature, and you do the same with exercise, but then you're generating waste products. But, if you're artificially raising your body temperature using a hot bath or a sauna, that needs to be balanced by a rest period, coming back into homeostasis. And when you're coming back into balance, you're training your body to turn off the inflammatory response, to turn off that cytokine storm, to put the brakes on a runaway immune system. So it's not just the heating up that's powerful, it's also the cooling down that's really powerful. And I just need to stress as well, because anyone can prove this themselves. They can just get into a hot bath, take their temperature and get to the point where, where they're, what I call comfortably uncomfortable, and show that, their body temperature's up. But heat is a really powerful force, and there are what I call common sense safety principles that can be used. And, you say, why don't doctors promote it? And it's because heat doesn't need a medical prescription or even medical supervision. This is something you can do at home. It's something you can do at your gym. But as I say, there are some common sense safety principles, and they are: you need to stay hydrated. So, with good quality water, and if you're sweating a lot and you need to rehydrate, you really want to have high quality water, so you don't dehydrate. You want to take care because heat can burn you. So if you're in a sauna, you don't put your hand on the rocks. It's sort of obvious. Also to take care with changes in posture. Because if you're lying down and you're vasodilated and you're hot, if you stand up suddenly, all the blood's going to drop down into your legs and you're going to get faint or dizzy, and maybe even pass out. So you just need to be careful with sudden changes in posture. You also need to know your own limits, and your limits will change from day to day, and change according to your moods, and they'll change according to how often you've exposed yourself to heat, because your resilience to heat will build up quite quickly. So you really need to know your own limits and not to force yourself. And I talk about not going beyond the state of forced mindfulness. And it's similar to, if you're doing a yoga stretch, you get to a point where you're at the limit of your stretch and it's sort of comfortably uncomfortable. It's that if you just breathe and concentrate, you can be there and it's okay. But if you're going to push yourself further, you'll hurt yourself. Well, extremes of temperature are similar to that. So you don't want to go beyond that state of being comfortably uncomfortable, or the state where your body starts to tell you, hey, it's getting hot, maybe we should go out. And I mean, that same thing happens, you're at the beach or you're in the sun, and eventually your body will say, hey, it's getting really hot, we need to cool down. So you need to be aware of that. So an awareness is really important. So you need to monitor, tune into your senses and monitor your own tolerance, and trying to avoid extremes of temperature when you're under the influence of drugs or alcohol that impair that judgment. And people have died in saunas, and most of the reported deaths are actually associated with alcohol use. Because if you're drunk, you lose sense. I mean, first of all, you get dehydrated when you're drunk, but also you lose the sense of, hey, I've gone beyond my limits. And finally, to rest, to have that balancing period, whether you're going from hot to cold, that you actually spend as much time in homeostasis as going back into homeostasis as you have done sort of going out of homeostasis with external heat. So, drinking, taking care, knowing your limits, being aware, and resting are just common sense principles. I mean, people know how to do this themselves, but they need to have common sense. So, when you pick up a hot coffee cup, you can be aware that how hot it is to touch it, and you don't. If it's going to burn your fingers, you'll put it down, or how hot it is when you sip it. If it's going to burn your lips, you sort of do it slowly. Well, heat is like that. You need to tune into your body, and your body will let you know. So there is a bit of self-responsibility involved, but again, doctors don't prescribe it, and there is no prescription to say this is how much heat I should prescribe you, because it depends on the temperature, the humidity, the time that you spend, but also your own tolerance. So there's a very subjective factor in there, and doctors sort of aren't that comfortable prescribing stuff that it's up to their patients to administer and supervise.
That was exactly what I was about to ask you, how long someone actually needs to spend either in a sauna or a bath. But what I hear you saying is it's really a self-regulated thing, listening to your body and spending as much or as little time in there as you feel comfortable. Is that right?
It really is. Well, as much of the time when you feel comfortably uncomfortable. Because if you just have a tepid bath, and that's a really nice thing to do, just have a thermoneutral bath. That's very relaxing because the weight of your skeleton is upheld, and you can relax probably more in a bath than you can in the air. But if you want to go to the extremes of temperature, then you do need to get to the point where you're comfortably uncomfortable. But you're right, there's no length of time you can prescribe, and it really depends because water will transmit heat 25 times more effectively than air. So if you're in a hot bath, I mean, there's no way you can't sweat, and there's no way you can really cool down. So, but a hot bath at 42 degrees feels really hot. Whereas a steam room, when there's a bit more air, you can tolerate a steam room at 48 or 50 degrees. If there's less humidity, like in a dry sauna, you can experience that up to, people roughly 70 to 80 would be typical, but a dry sauna can go up to 120 degrees, and you can tolerate that. So, the water and heat can't sort of be separated. It depends on the humidity and the temperature. And then it's a factor of time. And I'd recommend that people monitor the time, whichever heat source they're using, and know, okay, that today, took me 15 minutes till I started sweating and until I felt a bit uncomfortable, and took me, 15, 20 minutes to cool down. So then they've got a baseline, and they can find that, the next day they might start sweating earlier, and they might be able to stay longer before they feel uncomfortable because their body will adapt. And human bodies have been adapting to temperature changes ever since we were humans. Our European ancestors, as winter progressed, became more cold tolerant, and as summer, progressed, they became gradually more heat tolerant. And we're sort of unraveling the physiological effects of that. How brown fat can increase due to cold exposure, and then it just goes away if you don't use it. So, the brown fat, which is the mitochondrially dense fat that's around your blood vessels, it acts like a heater unit for your blood around your great vessels, can be built up if you have regular cold exposure. When I went to medical school, we were taught that brown fat was only in infants and hibernating animals.
That's right.
Because, of course, infants have a very big surface area to volume, so they radiate a lot of heat, and they need to generate their own internal heat, so they have brown fat. But once we're adults, we don't let ourselves get that cold. We have clothes, and we have cars, and we have central heating, and we know how to go inside. And so it's rare that we actually let ourselves get really cold, that we have to stimulate that brown fat. And when they were researching this, they actually thought brown fat was vestigial and wasn't useful in adults. And they did studies on Lapland reindeer herders, and they noticed in the summer that their brown fat deposits were minimal. But as the winter progressed, they started putting on brown fat. So by the time midwinter was there, they could sleep outside with their reindeers in very sub-zero temperatures and be comfortable because of their own internal heat production. So yeah, we've still got a lot to learn about our thermoregulatory capacity, but we certainly know that our ability to regulate our temperature is way greater than a virus. and a virus will be destroyed at temperatures that we can tolerate quite comfortably.
You mentioned before about the importance of staying hydrated and the type of water that someone's drinking. So obviously we want to direct people away from drinking water straight out of the tap. I actually drink distilled water myself, but some people use the reverse osmosis filter, and other people use like a vortex to actually create movement within their water. What's your thoughts on what the best type of water is to drink, how to prepare it,
So that's
how much should people be consuming?
Series of podcasts on this. I've just created an online course, 14-part online course just about water. And I've actually created a water company because after being a medical doctor for 30 years and half that time as a professor, it was like, what can I do in the world that's going to have the biggest impact? And just like I was saying about sleep as being the basic thing, and when you get that right, things go right. When you get your water right, things can go right, because water is the infrastructure of our body. We're 70% or 2/3 water by mass or by volume, but if you count our molecules, we're 99.9% water. Because water's got two tiny hydrogen atoms and an oxygen, and all the other biological molecules, nucleic acids and protein and collagen, are massive, and they're all in this liquid matrix. So water is 99% of our bodies, and it's not just what we drink. It's actually probably more important to pay attention to what we bathe in, and especially if you're using heat. And they did research in the 1990s, and they've followed it up, where they were looking at the release of chlorine and chlorine disinfection byproducts like chloroform and trihalomethanes, etc. And we know that they are toxic. I mean, that's the reason why they put chlorine in our drinking water, is because chlorine's so toxic that it'll kill bacteria at 0.2 to 0.6 parts per million at the point of use when it comes out of your tap. But what also happens with chlorine is it's volatile. And when you heat water above about 25 degrees, it becomes volatile, and you breathe it in, and you can also absorb it very rapidly through your skin. So if you're in a hot shower or a hot bath, well, this was a research they did to study how much chlorine do you get in your system when you have a hot shower or a hot bath from breathing or from dermal absorption compared to drinking it. So they got people to drink a litre of chlorinated water, and when they monitored their blood, they couldn't actually find any chloroform or trihalomethanes in their blood because it was all filtered out by the liver. It goes for the liver before it goes into the general circulation, and the liver takes a hit from that, but the liver filters that out. And then they did a study where they got people to have a hot shower and breathe fresh air, but have the water exposed to their skin, and straight away they had chloroform trihalomethanes appearing in the blood because it goes straight through the skin, bypasses the liver, and appears in their blood. And they did another study where they had people wear like a wetsuit and have a hot shower, but they breathed the air from the shower. And again, straight after the hot bath or the shower, just through inhalation, you get chloroform, trihalomethanes, other disinfection byproducts appearing in your blood because it's bypassed the liver. It's gone through the large surface area. So it is really important not just to drink quality water, to bathe in quality water.
And how are people doing that? Because I'm not sure if many people would even realize that or have something fixed to their tap to actually filter out any of those substances.
Yeah,
so how does someone do that?
There's a few ways. I've actually got a company selling beautiful water products, which I don't have to do a commercial plug here, but I mean, that's water that's filtered, structured, balanced, blessed, and can be given away for free. But if you want to do
what's the name of that company?
Beautiful Water. We're just about to launch. I'm selling, and I sell whole home water filters, so that creates beautiful water, which is filtered, structured, balanced, blessed, and can be given away for free. But if you don't have a water filter at home and you still want to have a chlorine-free bath, all you need to do is fill up your hot bath a little bit hotter than you would, turn the fan on, and wait 30 minutes, and the chlorine will evaporate. So you come back 30 minutes later, the fan's on, so you don't have to breathe it all in, and then you can have that's what I do. You have a dechlorinated bath that way, and that's what I do when I go to hotels and I travel, because sometimes the water is so chlorinated, you just don't want to breathe it or bathe in it. But if you have it set up really hot, don't burn yourself. Common sense is a really good thing. And then just put the fan on and then come back once it's evaporated off. So that's a really basic way. Another one is there are really good really not expensive KDF filters you can get for your shower head. Now, I don't sell them because there's a lot of them on the market, but they can help remove chlorine from your shower. And then what I promote are really high quality whole house water filters. So you have that on the mains line. So all your taps are producing water that's been filtered, and the filters I'm sourced actually structure the water. So they have like a vortex sort of effect on the water. So it turns calspar into aragonite. So it actually doesn't get rid of the minerals, but it does reduce their solubility, or actually increases their solubility, so it reduces their ability to form scale, so it actually can descale your kettles and your hot water service. And if you've got hard water, it's really hard to get things clean, and you get a lather. Soap doesn't lather, and you get sort of soapy film on things, also on your skin and your hair. So by bathing in water that has been structured can actually improve your skin, your hair. Certainly having chlorine-free water will improve the microbiome of your skin. And there's some really fascinating research there. I mean, when I went through medical school, 30 plus years or nearly 40 years ago, we were taught that the skin had a surface area of 1.8 square meters. And they use that, for calculating burn surface areas and stuff. But then a study came out last year, I think it was in Nature Medicine, and they said, well, we know that the gut has a big surface area for interacting with microbes because the gut has the villi, which like little fingers that increase the surface area of the gut enormously. But then they said, well, the skin has these like inverted villi every time you have a hair follicle or a sweat gland. And that hair follicle or sweat gland, which ducts down below the skin surface, is also lined by epithelium, and it's full of bacteria, and these are the good commensal bacteria. But it's also, that's where the oils are secreted that protect your skin from the sun and pathogens and damage and keep your skin subtle and elastic, and that first line of defense I was talking about with your nasal mucosa, that goes over your whole skin. So if you're bathing in chlorinated water, you're oxidizing those oils, and you're pretty much waging war on those good commensal bacteria on your skin. And that then sets you up for, dry skin, aging skin, so your skin will prematurely age, brittle hair, a whole range of hair and skin conditions that, people will spend a fortune on creams and lotions and medicines, but, just a water filter and good water will improve that. And as a beauty product, beauty products all talk about hydration and moisturizing and cleansing. Well, the best hydration, moisturizing or cleansing product is good quality water. And if you're not using good quality water and using all these other expensive products, well, then you're probably just wasting your time and your money. I was just saying, so water is it's such an amazing, mysterious substance, but it's one of the basic requirements, or it is the basic requirement for life. Yet people don't think about, just like heat, people don't think about it or take it seriously. Well, water, people, oh yeah, maybe I'll get a filter for my tap, but they don't really consider the impact the water has on their whole life and their biome.
I've been thinking recently about water and the ability for it to detoxify our body if we're actually consuming it straight out of the tap, say it's town water. Does purified, structured, vortexed water actually have a better capacity to detoxify and dissolve toxins and poisons when it's in your system than something that's already full of pollutants, like something coming out of your tap?
Well, certainly, I mean, if you're drinking tap water, then you are drinking water that's not just full of intentional toxicants like chlorine and fluoride, which are, highly toxic, but also these, what they call emerging contaminants. And that includes pharmaceutical residues, microplastics, nanoparticles, pesticides, a whole range of industrial chemicals, as well as, heavy metals and sediments and then microbial, spores and bacteria and viruses, etc. So there's we should call it tap liquid. It's not really tap water. It's a whole liquid full of stuff. So that's, improving that is a really sort of basic thing you can do. But in terms of its ability to detoxify, well, the research just hasn't been done. I mean, even the research on the effect of chlorine on the gut microbiome hasn't been done, even though
Is that right?
Yeah, well, there's a study going on in Perth right now in infants, where it's a cohort study where they're comparing infants drinking chlorinated water versus filtered water, and looking at their microbiome development. But it's common sense that certainly an infant, when it's developing its microbiome, is much more susceptible to antibiotics, but also to chlorinated water. And in fact, the NHMRC, the National Health and Medical Research Council in Australia, recommend in their infant feeding guidelines to boil water before you make infant formula for babies, because you don't want to feed babies chlorinated water while they're in that very delicate window of development of when they're developing their microbiome.
So could chlorine and other contaminants from water be passed through to a breastfeeding child through the milk?
There's stuff that I probably not, because water's polar, and milk is lipophilic toxicants come through the milk. So and that's been well documented that DDT and PCBs and all these lipophilic toxicants get passed through breast milk, and actually the mother detoxifies through her breast milk. So if you're a first child, you get a much higher dose of those toxicants than if you're a second or third child, because the mother's detoxified into the first child. But as far as water, it's really, if you're preparing like a packet formula and you're using tap water to do that, that's when the chlorine will go into the infant formula. And it's much, all the NHMRC recommendations are to boil water before you use it for making up an infant formula, because of the unknown effect on the microbiome. But we're still researching that. But we know that the reason why they put chlorine in our water is because it's so toxic, and at 0.2 to 0.6 parts per million. And sort of this policy we have, it's a public health sort of principle that's been used, which is health through poison. We'll put poison in your water to make it healthy, and we'll put poison in vaccines to make them effective, and we'll put poison on our food to make it more nutritious. So there's been a policy, it's almost an anti-life policy of health through poison. And at a public health level, it might be appropriate to get rid of cholera and typhoid outbreaks, but at a personal level, you want to avoid drinking and bathing in water that's been poisoned. As I say, drinking less poison is good for you. Bathing in less poison is good for you. And if you don't
Makes sense.
Yeah, and if you don't use a filter, you are a filter. Again, you don't need a medical degree or 2 PhDs to understand that. It's just basic. Yeah, if I don't use a filter, then I am being the filter, and all the crap's getting caught up in my body. And what's that going to do to me? And we just have to look at what that's doing to the population. There's a great research article that came out at the start of this year, where they postulated that chlorine in drinking water could be one of the implicated in virtually all chronic disease, because pretty much all chronic disease, modern lifestyle diseases, are related to inflammation and gut dysbiosis. And if the chlorine in our water, which is designed to do, kills bacteria and it's causing gut dysbiosis, then there's a huge public health impact of using chlorinated water that's just unrecognized, it's unmonitored, and it's completely avoidable. So, and the whole idea, even if we think about our water distribution system, often it's very, very old. There's biofilm, there's sediment, there's rust, there's lead. And also when you put chlorine in water, chlorine will leach lead out of galvanized or lead solder. It'll leach copper, it causes pitting and causes leaks, but it'll actually make any toxicity, heavy metals and stuff within the distribution system become released and more toxic. So there really is so many reasons to have point of use filtration rather than saying, let's filter it for the whole community, because then it has to go through the distribution line, and then biofilm and sediment and heavy metals get introduced. So it's it's left up to our own personal actions to take responsibility for our health and try and get the best water source possible. And people are really keen, and even though I've got a whole house water filter, I love going to my local spring, and there's a website, findaspring.com, and that has a list of all the natural spring water sources, and you can just go and for free and get natural spring water. And I recommend people do that. Find out where your local spring is, protect it, use it, And then you've got a free source of water that's much, much higher quality than any bottled water you can ever buy. And
That's really, really valuable advice. I'm not sure that I've certainly never thought about something like that. I'll have to check that website out. What was the
Find the
website?
Spring, I think it's .com, could be .org.
Findspring.com.
And it's a great website. And I must say, it's like, it almost, for me, when I go there, I take my kids there. Mount Donabuang in just about an hour and a half drive out of Melbourne is where I go. And it's like it's like a pilgrimage. You go out into nature, you get the water. Often I see friends there, and often you'll see all these people with all different ethnic backgrounds coming with their demijohns and their bottles to fill up the spring water because they know it's really good because they're doing home bottling and stuff. And it's also, if you're doing home fermentation and home bottling, you want to have really good water. So this, it's actually a really great thing to get in touch with your local spring, and it's you get a connection for where your water's coming from. And I've got this sort of personal, I don't know, mission to get rid of plastic water bottles. And that's a huge mission because there are 500 billion with a B, plastic water bottles made every year.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So this company I've created, Beautiful Water, which has these different the whole house filters and under sink filters. I'm encouraging health practitioners to become affiliates and pass those filters on to their patients, but also to install one of these filters into their clinics or their conscious restaurant or yoga studio or wherever they've got an outlet, and give that water away for free. Now, when the water comes out of these filters, it costs about a third of 1 cent, so per litre. So you can give away a third of a cent per litre of water, but it means and there's a website, an app called Refill My Bottle, and you can then find where your nearest free beautiful water outlet is or free water source is. But if you're giving away this water for free, then anyone in your vicinity that's selling plastic water bottles will hopefully sell less of them. And people will start to know, why would I buy a plastic water bottle for $3 where I can go and fill my water bottle with a better quality water here for nothing? And to start that as a movement, to not oppose. And my philosophy is rather than oppose what I don't want, I want to create what I do want. And I want to be able to go around the world and have these free, beautiful water outlets that I can go anywhere and know that people are taking care of that water, and I don't have to spend money on, a lot of money often on bottled water, which is damaging the planet and probably damaging me as well. Just even the water, because the water quality in bottled water is not nearly as high quality as sort of advertising would like us to believe.
So if people can't get a hold of the water that you're talking about right now, what's the best way for them to store their water if it's not in plastic? What's your opinion there?
This is such a complex topic. So, at home, I've got a ceramic egg that holds about 42 litres that I put my water in at home, and it's designed by sort of Victor Schauberger principles. So it's a ceramic egg shape, and that egg shape, because it's ceramic, the water can evaporate through the ceramic, so the water stays cool. But then the cool water will drop to the bottom, and then the warm water will rise to the top. So the water's continually moving just because of the shape of the water vessel. So, because water, to keep it sort of alive, and water is alive, but to keep it having an energy to it and a structure to it, it likes to keep moving. Once you've got water, trapped and stagnant, it loses these sort of life-giving properties. But it's unavoidable. So we all need to carry around water. I mean, ideally, you want to have sources of good water wherever you go. You don't have to carry it around. But I think stainless steel is certainly better than plastic, and it's reusable. And then there are all these different devices that you can create a vortex device yourself for less than $1, or almost for no money. And there's you can go into the internet and look how to make them. But basically, you get 2 bottle caps, and you glue them sort of cap to cap, end to end, and drill a hole through, and then you screw 2 bottles on those caps, 1 bottle full, 1 bottle empty, and you turn it upside down like a big hourglass or a big egg timer. And the water will then go from the top bottle that's upside down through the hole that you've drilled, and it will actually form, the whole water as it goes down will form a vortex. And that vortex is literally structured water. A vortex is a structure that the water forms. And vortexes form in nature. I mean, galaxies from air turbulence all form vortices. And having that structure in the water actually makes the water what we call exclusion zone water, which is described as the fourth phase of water. And that's sort of been introduced to us by Gerald Pollack, who has written a great book, and he's got a really good TED talk on the fourth phase of water. And he calls it exclusion zone water because when water becomes structured, it excludes solutes. It actually becomes more pure and it becomes more structured. And actually at that point, it becomes not just H2O, it's actually H3O2 because it forms these hexagonal sheets. And that's the form of water that's in our bodies. I mean, if we're 99.9% water, how come we're not puddles on the floor? And the reason is because, we're structured water, and, our skeletons and the other big biological molecules are sort of a product of that structure. So yeah, having, structuring our water. There's also magnetic devices that you can use, which again, very cheap and, they're can be reused again and again. And they've done research, reasonable research on this, where they've looked at using magnetic water treatments for producing concrete and producing bread and for growing agriculture. And what they found is that if you magnetize water and use it to make a dough, you get a moister dough and a better quality bread. If you use magnetized water and use it to make concrete, you get a stronger concrete mix. So demonstrably stronger just from putting magnets in the water through magnets before you create your concrete mix. And then if you do that in agriculture, you can get a higher agricultural yield with less water. So you get up to like 30% more produce with 20 or 30% less water. And in a country like Australia, that's incredible. But again, these products, while they're out there, they're not that well promoted. They're not that well understood. Water is there are 72 scientific anomalies about water that we still don't understand. So we're still a long way to go. And I really believe that as we understand water better, we'll understand ourselves because we are water. But you don't have to understand all that stuff to know that when you're drinking good water and bathing in good water, you feel better. And so yeah, people become more aware of the water and also more conscious of their water. And again, I've got these filters which we've just spent more than 6 months creating a design that goes on these filters that has sacred geometry and sort of magical imbued symbols and blessings that says, I love you, I respect you, I thank you, I bless you, I am you, over and over again in the design. But you don't need all of that sort of magical woo-woo stuff, even though it looks beautiful and it brings consciousness to that water. All you need to do is create a little image, create a blessing, whatever is meaningful to you, and put that where your water comes from. Might be just wrap it around the pipe that comes into your house, and just having done that, you actually create a conscious connection to where your water's coming from, and even that will change your relationship with the water that you have from there. And I think anything we can do to raise our consciousness and our awareness of water, both the water that we absorb and drink and bathe in, but also the water that's inside us, is really beneficial. And then you get into the water in your house and humidity and water damage and dampness and mold. So we live in this zone of 40 to 60% humidity. Below 40% we get viruses, above 70% we get mold. So we want to keep the water vapor and the ecosystem in our home really sort of supportive of our lives. So, and there is so much you can do. I mean, these my water filters are the best I could find. And the reason why I went into that wasn't because I wanted to become a water filter salesman. It's just that I've been talking about toxicity and these topics for so long, and there wasn't a water filter on the market that I could say this is the one to get. Yet I saw that there were all these different individual elements existed, and that I could put them together. So that's what I've done. The highest quality cartridges from Russia, and the stainless steel canisters, and the vortex devices, which we're getting from Switzerland, and putting it all together with these designs. So that's it's been a journey, and it's an ongoing journey. But it's there are so many things you can do yourself, like just have a hot bath and wait a while, or go to your local spring, or make your own blessing and put that on your water. And all these things can really upgrade the water that you're using, but the water of who you are.
I think it's so important that you're doing that work because everybody focuses so much on the food or the quality of the food that they're eating. And very seldom do people actually think about water. It's absolutely fascinating, all the things that you've been mentioning. And one of the things that have stuck with me that you mentioned earlier on was the fact that people are really fearful about what's going on in the world at the moment because they don't feel like they've got control over their own health, and they don't realize that they can take some control over their own health. It doesn't need to be left up to the doctor or the naturopath or the nutritionist. And something as simple as getting access to quality water can do that.
Yeah, well, I've been studying since I started medicine in 1982. So nearly 40 years I've been at university studying all this stuff from Western medical perspective and natural medical perspective, Eastern medical perspective, and recently I've been trying to summarize all this knowledge into information to make it useful to people. And I didn't intend this, but it's been coming out as poetry. So I've got a poem which is the recipe for wellness, and it's simple. And the recipe for wellness is: bathe in beautiful water, prepare delicious food, make the most of every breath, dance through every mood. Tend the soil beneath your feet, embrace sunshine from above, share your gifts with all the world, fill your life with love. So that's simple. It's not. It's not complicated.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I really, really liked that.
So
And
they're the things I'm trying to promote. That doesn't cost any money or take a lot of time or equipment, but it's really profoundly transformative.
it's a message that more people need to get or receive, Professor Cohen, because there are those things that seem so simple that have a profound effect on our health. And I think if more people make those changes, they'll actually see drastic or really significant effects in improvements in their health. And I think so many people feel as though they have no control. And if there is something that goes wrong with their health, the only person that can help them is their doctor. And there's no way for them to actually do anything to get themselves better.
I think
And the more that we...
Yeah, it's so important. I think we're going to end up soon, but I'll share you one other poem that just came out recently, because I've been trying to, how do you counter the fear that's out there? Because there is so much fear around. And, my whole life I've always said, rather than fight what I don't want, I'm going to, concentrate and focus on creating what I do want. And then I was contemplating, how do I get that message out? And this poem came out, which I call the antidote to fear. So the antidote to fear is: foster love of poetry, express yourself through dance, fill your life with fun and joy, friendship and romance. Focus on the world you want, be the change you want to see. Spread goodwill to all you meet, live fearless and free. And again, it's simple.
That's a wonderful way to sum up everything that we've been talking about today, Professor Cohen. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I know that you're a very busy man and you've probably got a lot of other things to get done today, but I do appreciate your time, and I'm sure that everyone listening today will also really appreciate what you've spoken about. I've learnt so much in the last hour with you. Thank you so much for being here today.
That's my pleasure. And if people want to find out more, extremewellness.co is my website where you can find filters in my poetry, and drmarc.co. I have more than 100 peer-reviewed papers and my books and other information there. They can find out more about me. And we're just creating this online protestival right now, and it's protestival.co, which is putting just good vibe music out there, and we're going to have workshops and information on health and legal information and different knowledge, and which is like an online festival that we've created as a Melbourneian response to the lockdowns that we're living under here, and to transcend fear and just raise human spirit, and then get above that whole dross of what's happening in the media and the fear mongering that's going on, and come back to who we are, and that is we're meant to be healthy. Recipe for wellness is simple. It's not complicated, but let's just focus on what's important. And that's what I'm trying to do with all of my communications, is getting people to really focus on what's important, get in touch with themselves. And, when you're at peace with yourself, then, doing the right thing becomes obvious. It becomes obvious what you need to do. But when you're scared and you're not in touch with yourself, then, you can be led down these paths that are really quite damaging. And that's what I'm hoping to avoid.
You're an absolute wealth of knowledge, Professor Cohen. Thank you so much. I've really resonated with a lot of things that you've said today, and I've actually got pages and pages of notes here. I'm going to have to go back and actually listen to this myself, I think. So I really appreciate your time.
Well, it's so great to be able to lecture on topics that I want to tell, rather than I was teaching in universities for nearly 30 years. And now I get to just talk about the stuff I want to. So thanks for the platform. Congratulations on what you're doing, and good luck with your PhD and getting positive messages out there. And I'm really grateful for what you're doing and the opportunity to come on your show. So thank you.
Not a problem. And I would love to have you back sometime, because I just want to keep going. But I know that that time is very precious.
Or maybe we can do a part 2. Let's schedule that in at some stage.
And possibly a part 3.
There we go.
Thanks again, Professor Marc Cohen, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you have any questions or comments, head on over to humanly.com/podcast and join the discussion. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and become part of our growing community of like-minded health professionals. Until next time.